Adesso è il momento di Olga Slepner, consigliere e direttore generale e responsabile delle relazioni internazionali dell'autorità governativa dell'acqua dello Stato di Israele, uno Stato che sappiamo eccelle nell'uso molto consapevole dell'acqua. Col suo intervento ci mostrerà come lo Stato di Israele, attraverso specifiche scelte strategiche, sta cercando di trasformare i grossi strutturali problemi della siccità idrica in opportunità di sviluppo. Ci introdurrà anche alle scelte tecnologiche e gestionali che vengono realizzate dai sistemi di allarme fino agli impianti di desalinizzazione mirati all'uso potabile dell'acqua. Grazie e a lei la parola.
Distinguished guests and especially hosts of this unique event, I want to join my colleagues that spoke before me. Thank you. And thank for this wonderful opportunity to share our Israeli humble experience of the water management. Yes, I'm trying. Okay, we all have challenges in water sector, so this was the first one. Okay, so water challenges. When we start preparing the presentation, usually we want to check, what is it? It's a very how we say it, modern world challenges. So we Google, and what Google shows us? Well, it's something in blue. These are beautiful charts that we all use to hide the things that we want to present in a beautiful graphic way. Let's see what is behind this and check the water problems. Oh. The Google shows us a different picture. It's a little brown, and it's all the truth in the face, how it would say. The problem of connection between water and society prosperity level is actually not new. In ancient Egypt, we could see that there was a Nile meter that connected the level of the river with the level of the social prosperity. When water level was high or too high, it was disaster of floods, and was too low, it wasn't enough water to feed the inhabitants near the river. So we actually don't invent anything. Water is something that we take for granted. It's a basic commodity, and we think it's supposed to be there like an air. In that case, of course, everyone has a right for water, and we think it's free because it's there in the nature. But in our world, it's not the water in its natural shape that we want, because we don't want to take a bucket and go to the lake. We really want the right for the water supply, which means that we have the possibility to open the tap, to flush the water in the toilet. I believe that everyone is here sometimes experience a water stop in their houses, and when it's 4 hours, we could drink mineral water, and if it's 8 hours, we are going out to look for a toilet, because the sanitary problem is in these days are much more problematic than drinking. And of course, we want the water as a tool to connect it to the production line in our industries, to have a proper sanitary environment, and to leave the environment in a healthy way. So let's see what are those challenges or problems that we are facing. This chart that my colleague from Virginia also had this similar one, which maps the freshwater stress in past and the future. We are in Israel, actually has the luck to have less water from the beginning. So we know that the water is stressed. It's a constant data. It's not something that suddenly occurs. It's there, and it is going to stay with us. The Global Water Intelligence is a journal that recently mapped some global trends that are occurring today with the water challenges, showing immediately that global warming is connected directly to droughts and floods and the water scarcity. And I think the humble Israeli experience actually shows how we can find an opportunity in a crisis. Because as I said, the water stress reality is something that we had from the beginning. The same map shows us not only physical water scarcity, but economical. But we think there is a third aspect for that, and this is the management of the scarcity. So some little facts about the Israeli water sector. As you know, we are a very, very small country, but quite populate, 9 million, almost 9 million inhabitants in area of 22,000 kilometers. We have more than 200 hectares of irrigated fields, over 100 industrial plants, and our annual water supply is more than 2 billion cubic meters. As you can see, it's divided mostly to agriculture. It's more than a half of percentages. Domestic sector is less than 40%, and they have a few consumption for industry, and of course we leave some for nature. As you can see here, and I'll elaborate about this later on, agriculture water sector is based not only on potable water, drinking water, but a lot of, and actually most of it, on recycled water. So what is the water balance that we deal with? As you can see the numbers, I won't read them, but there is a stable and consistent deficit, which is growing between the natural available water resources and our water demand. Above this, we have an occurring natural water replenishment who is challenged by the climate change. The symptoms of droughts and floods are more intense. It stays with us longer, and in effects in more severe mode. So it means that when in natural an average situation we have not much rain, today it comes with shorter periods and in more intense in every period, so the ground doesn't have the chance to absorb the water and we couldn't use it. The major climate change threats that we see are in us. It's not something that we have on presentation, we have it on the annual planning. As I said, it is the decrease in total water volume, so it comes with quantity and quality of water. The variability of the water, the precipitation is very variable, so the planning on average is quite problematic, and decision makers love to have average when they put data in the planning. And as I mentioned, the extremalities of climate change occurrence, floods and droughts. This is just a picture of 1 year of 2013-14 winter, when on the same, and as we say, we are a very small country, on the same year we had the most severe drought in Israel, measured in 100 years, and we have major floods events in quite a desert part of the country. So what are the solutions that Israeli water sector is tried to see to solve these problems? The model that we adopted for implementing the sustainable management of the water sector is the Integrated Water Resources Management, IWRM. And it's based on 2 pillars. The water resources pillar, which we'll talk now, and the water governments, which will follow after that. Water resource pillar is standing on 3 legs. It is the natural water resources, as we presented, the precipitation, the enrichment of water, and the climate change models. The manufactured water, which are a major water resource today, mostly wastewater reuse or recycling water, and seawater desalination. And of course, the integration between those and planning and operation on balance and the holistic way of planning. So just few words. As we presented, our country have usually rain in the northern part and absolutely drought in the southern part. From the beginning, we established a main water supply system that carrying water from the major natural water resources, which is the Sea of Galilee or Lake of Kinneret, and 2 major aquifers, coastal and the mountain ones. And the main idea, as I said, of managing the water sector in a sustainable manner is to look to the whole picture. So we could consider the needs of all the consumers, as you can see here, households and agriculture, industry, our diplomatic agreements, and of course, save something for nature and future generation, but looking and managing it through all the aspects of the water supply chain. So it's the planning, the recharge, the convenience, quality, and so and so. As mentioned, the natural resources are not only scarce, but vary and cannot be reliable data for water balance since the climate change affects. And so the way to reliability of the water supply, we need variability in 2 aspects. One of them is the seasonal operation, which means that we have operational plans for our water resources on a semi-annual mode, and of course the variety of the water resources. As this conference puts a special emphasis on the climate change, a few slides that telling about the climate change preparedness. We know from a common life that fearing of the not knowing is worse than facing the bad, because facing means that we are dealing and we are resolving. And so our hydrological service developed a model to predict events of floods and droughts. And this model serves us not only on annual planning, but as you could see, on a daily basis. This is just a picture. I couldn't explain it because I'm not a hydrologist, but it is from my colleague, and he will be happy to share with everyone who wants it. This is a regional climate modeling idea that actually complying an algorithm combining 14 different models of developed in Europe and United States, and it is our basic planning data. And you could see it, a real picture from car of one of our colleagues that have an application for its usage every day when it's needed, and alerting about flood events in real time. This slide is a real slide from our last operational semi-annual committee that shows the prediction of water coming to the Sea of Galilee, as mentioned, one of the water resources that we use in our balance. And it could be seen that we have a possibility to plan the operational plan to how much to take from each resource based on this prediction, which is, has an ensemble of the climate change model. And just to compare it, because this is the one from the semi-annual plan, this model is for per hour operational plan for a certain part of the Jordan River. Because of scarcity of the resources, we try to balance between all the consumers in the area. So this could be, of course, agriculture that wants as many water as it should be put out of the river for their needs, and our nature protectors who wants to leave the water as it is and that all could enjoy the water course running, and also some tourist attractions of boats and rafting. So we managed to have an operational plan that during mornings and days we leave the water for nature and rafting, and we try to allow pumping for a few hours at night so it could be served for agriculture. So as you can see, the scarcity of the natural water resources urge Israel to seek sustainable manufactured solution. As it's shown on this graph, during the last 30 years, the water supply shifted almost totally from natural water resources to half of it, which is now consists of desalinated and recycled seawater. So a few slides about the seawater desalination. We have today, after it didn't come easy because you need to convince everyone in the government and in the parliament that this large-scale infrastructure project that costs billions is a must. Today we have 5 large-scale desalination plants acting, supplying almost totally the domestic consumption of Israel, which is about a little bit less than 600 million cubic meters a year that are along the coast, and there are 2 plants that now in planning for the future needs. This is just the pictures of these huge plants. One of the shifts that we need to do after establishing these huge desalination plants is, as you maybe recall, in the beginning I said that we have a national water carrier that takes water from the north to the southern part. Today, major water resources are actually on the coast, so we needed to connect all this plant and to develop the water system so the flow goes instead of north to the south, also from west to east and to the north. The business model of majority of these plants is what it's called BOT, Build, Operate and Transfer, and it's managed with the public and private partnership. What is allowed us a great efficiency in technology, resulting a good price per cubic meter of the water purchased by the state. Another huge revolution that we have in the water sector concerning the manufactured water resources is reuse of all sewage effluents. It's starting with collecting all sewage and treating it to the right level that allows us to use it for irrigation and partly to return it to nature. The treatment and reuse is a great example of turning the environmental problem into the opportunity, because we solve the problem of the city of disposing the wastewater, and we help agricultural farmers to take it as a reliable resource and protect them from the cutbacks that are in the natural potable water quota because of the drought season. So as you can see here, almost 90% of the wastewater is reused in Israel, and half of it is reused to a tertiary quality, which means that it enables us an unrestricted irrigation and releasing to certain streams and rivers. The other aspect and important matter to maintain the water resources below is taking care of the quality of water. We don't mean here the quality of the drinking water standards, which is strictly regulated by the Ministry of Health, but regarding the water quality of the source, which means that we use preventive measures of contamination, monitoring, and remediation of polluter water bodies. Just one example of the directives for industrial wastewater standard is the regulation of a long list of components that are forbidden in a certain level to appear in the wastewater. And of course, the leverage for the industries is a high tariff if these components are found in the water. So it makes it not profitable to pollute. And just to conclude the water resources pillar, we can see the shift from past to future concerning the cocktail of natural and manufactured water resources, which you could see the natural potable sources is staying constant as we grow, but we are planning to enlarge desalination and the recycled water. And from here, we go to the second, but not less important pillar of a governance. Pillar as a leg of the integrated water resources model. The basis of this pillar is regulation system, a financial model that sets a principle for cost recovery and fairness for the tariffs, and of course the service standards for the water consumers. The legislative basis allowing Israel to manage its water resources, it's actually laid in the first paragraph of the Israeli water law. The water law approved in 1959, which is a long time ago, and it still says that water resources belong to the public. As you can see, for water, we mean everything. I think the only thing that we don't count is sweat of the people. But everything requires from water, and the idea that you own the land doesn't mean that you own the water that is above or behind the land, and you can use it without license. What accompanies this major principle is that we measure everything. Every drop counts and monitor. It's not a slogan for us. It's an everyday principle. And we even have an internal joke on this, that as a CIA, in God we trust, all other we monitor. All these beautiful pictures not really came easy to us, because until 2007, the power to manage the water sector were divided between 11 ministries and agencies, ironically taking care of each sector on its own sector that it's presented. So, for example, Agricultural Ministry set tariffs for agriculture. Obviously, they didn't want to set tariff that will make it possible to develop the water sector. It just wanted it as low as possible. So the Water Commissioner, who was the previous body that responsible to manage the water sector, couldn't really do anything, because every ministry that was responsible of means to manage the water sector was in conflict of interest. The outcomes of this situation was water crisis, deficit of water on a constant basis, environmental damages for aquifers, and cutbacks in the agricultural quotas. And it took us only 10 years, 2 huge drought periods, 3 investigation committees on a parliamentary level, and a big fight in the legislation. But we took a large reform and make it into life. On the way, it of course was accompanied by struggles between the ministries, who had this idea of not in my backyard principle, which says, of course, it's a beautiful reform, we will vote for it. Just leave us the tariff thing for the agriculture. So, I don't know, it was a miracle, but somehow everybody agreed to put aside the disagreement, and the water authority was established. And today we could see this triangle that represent the water sector main player. The Israeli Governmental Water Authority is an independent professional organ that has all the powers to manage, plan, regulate, develop, and monitor the water sector. The suppliers, which are in Israel, a national water company, Mekorot, my colleague later on will present its achievements. 56 today, actually, municipal water companies and more than 1,000 local suppliers, and of course, several sectors of consumers. The Water Authority is governed by a board. As I said, the major difference between the previous situation and today, that this is one table for decision making, and the representative on that table are high-rank professionals and not politicians from 6 ministries that have part in the water sector, and of course 2 public representatives. This table has a power of setting regulation, which status is bylaws. There is no veto in the table, and the majority of voices allows us to discuss on one table different aspects of the water sector and make the decision. The second leg of the government's pillar, as said, is change that we had in our economic policy. The methodology based on transparency system that enables suppliers to develop the infrastructure and encouraging them with efficiency. And as accompanying to that, it was a huge reform in the water tariffs that has 2 major principles. First of all, covering of all costs, so a significant change actually enabled us to free the water sector from the dependency on the governmental budget, and as I am sure it's an international problem of the bad guys of the Ministry of Finance, who always see other interests than water. And of course, it also helped us a lot with the pressure that from time to time we could see on the political arena of short-term interest, because for huge investments in water infrastructure, it's a big problem when you need to explain today something that will be good for 10 or 15 years. And of course, the other principle is from the consumer point of view. All users of water in a given sector pay the same price, so it doesn't matter if somebody lives on a city that's near to the lake, he will pay the same price as a person who lives far away from the water source. So just a glimpse on the water system tariff for the domestic sector. It has 2 blocks, when the lower tariff actually allowing a sufficient amount of water in an affordable price, and anyone that has a need in more water could pay. It's just a breakdown that could show us covering all costs of the water sector. One word about the municipal water sector, who also was going through a large reform. The problem was that municipalities who used to manage the water sector took it on the same basket of budget, and something that was in need to develop could go to another need for, which is not less important, but the water sector suffered and was neglected. And what we did through major legislation is to establish municipal water companies who are still owned by the municipalities, but all the revenues from the water tariffs are obliged to go to the water infrastructure in the same city and not to other needs of the municipality, and they are subjected to regulation of the water authority. On the matter of the water demand aspect, Israel is famous in its technology and agriculture, so you could just see a nice chart that shows that for one water unit, during the years today, we produce 4 times more agricultural product. On the domestic water consumption, Combining the regulation with educational and media campaign, we succeeded to stabilize the domestic consumption under the annual quantity of about 90 cubic meters per capita, and this without making any drastic measures or restricting the consumption for the household. And it's actually saved us one large desalination plant, so it's about $1 billion who was saved just through water consumption measure. Of course, in the severe periods of droughts, a comprehensive nationwide media campaign called Citizens to Save. And as we said in the beginning, there is an opportunity in a crisis. So the willingness of the population to save water during drought period actually allowed us to save it, as the water conservation is a way of life. It's not something that we should do only on the drought. So just to conclude, the water sector today is that every part of it understands its role. Consumers know that water is a precious commodity. They have rights for sustainable development, but it requires payment for that. Suppliers need to assure a reliable water supply in a high standard, but they could expect from us a cost recovery for its services. And of course, we as a regulator, our mission is to have this system alive and balanced. This is a warning sign for us as a regulator. Today, we just need to be careful not to overpower the sector, and we work on simplifying the regulation system so anyone except the lawyers could understand what we have in action. So it was really, in a nutshell, the principle of the Israeli model of managing the water sector, and we truly believe that water is a matter of deeds, not words. Thank you so much.